morning. I'm with the wonderful Chris Robb. He's the author of Mass Participation Sports Events and the CEO of Mass Participation World. Hey, Chris, welcome.
Hi, Darren. Great to see you. Good to
Lovely.
catch up. Thanks for this wonderful opportunity. Very excited.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you indeed. Now, I know you're talking to us from your home in Bali today. Uh,
Yeah.
what's it like in paradise?
Look, we're very lucky. As we were speaking before we started recording, it's incredible here. We've just come back from a beautiful weekend of camping. As you know, my wife Ted and I've got a beautiful little, nearly 6-year-old boy Sam,
Wow.
and we had this amazing time camping up on a coffee plantation in the north of Bali, which was absolutely wonderful.
Incredible. It's, makes me jealous hearing those wonderful stories, because I'm in Melbourne, as you know, and we're in stage 4 lockdown at the moment. And so I guess we're living in very opposite worlds. So I hope you guys stay safe up there.
Yeah, look, it's wonderful, and I hope it's not too long. I've got fond memories of sitting on the beach with you and Andrew Griffiths when you were here and celebrating the launch of one of your books on the beach with the fireworks. Wasn't that just incredible? Hopefully, it's not too long before we can replicate that.
Oh,
Maybe even come back and launch this book here.
thank you for the invitation. I remember that day very clearly. In fact, if you can just look behind me at the moment, I'll get my sides right.
Yeah,
That that
there,
up,
there
up
it
on the
is.
wall, there's the
Yeah,
photo of Andrew and I sitting looking at the full moon as the fireworks are about to start at that book launch. So very fond times for me.
it was wonderful, and it was a beautiful full moon this weekend, actually.
Oh,
So,
is it? Chris, my focus is on accountability. Accountability is my thing. And I'm really fascinated to understand the role of accountability and what that plays with your teams and your stakeholders when you're putting together a major event. Singapore Marathon, 60,000 participants, 5,000 volunteers. Mate, how do you bring that sort of thing together?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, and something that I'm obviously very passionate about, and very lucky to have had the opportunity to be at the helm of an event like that. Look, I think at the real outset, it's being very clear on what your objectives are, and there are obviously many of them in an event like that. If you just start with who your stakeholders are, from your internal stakeholders of your staff. You have a team. I'm out of the business that used to organise that. I sold that business to Ironman about 4 years ago now. But, I would have a full-time team of 30 staff. And as we grew towards the event, that would build to 5,000 staff and volunteers on event day,
Jeez.
which is, pretty huge. And you've then got to communicate differently with all of them, but then there's all these external stakeholders that you're impacting. So you're shutting down a busy city like Singapore, and as in the case of all of these major events, your major city marathons, you're impacting hotels, you're impacting places of worship, you're impacting hospitals, normal little businesses. The people who usually on a Saturday and Sunday morning will get up and walk across the road and buy their newspaper or have their bowl of noodles, and people that are traveling to catch up with family and friends. So, there's a lot of thinking and planning and on the ground work that has to be done to engage with all of those stakeholders. So it's,
Yep.
one of the key elements is engagement.
Yep.
Coming back to, the whole theme of accountability, you can't expect to have people accountable, I believe, unless you've engaged with them first. And that's whether that's engaging with your core team, your volunteers, your clients, as in terms of sponsors and so on, your participants. I mean, they obviously play a huge part in that. Again, talk about it from a customer perspective. Imagine
Yep.
you ran a business that went from fundamentally 0 customers to 60,000 customers in the space of 4 to 5 months, sometimes as little as 3 to 4 months.
Yep.
And if you haven't engaged with them and held them accountable to some degree, that's accountable to train and turn up on the start line in the right condition. It's trained and accountable to bring the right things with them. It's trained and accountable to be able to behave in the right way when they're out on the route at aid stations and start lines and all that kind of stuff. It's not just the 5,000 staff, it's the 60,000 people and the millions of people in the city around them that you're hoping will be accountable in some way to support the event.
So you talk, well, you covered so much there. You talked about engagement is the first place it begins. Can we talk a little bit more about how you go about getting engagement with firstly, I guess at a staffing level before you then expand that to a bigger audience? How does engagement start for you?
Yeah, so I think, most importantly, it's being able to engage with the team to ensure that you're all on the same vision and have the same objective, which in our case was to deliver a safe and enjoyable event. So, we're all on board to be able to deliver that.
Yes.
We're then all on board in terms of what our responsibility is with each of our functional areas and how we interplay with each other, because it's a huge amount of, the saying that I use so often in our industry, you're only as good as your weakest link. You get something wrong in a group like that, and you're up the creek without a paddle, so to speak. So being sure that everyone is bought into the objective. Then in terms of detail, it's then building a very detailed timeline and plan. And obviously, when you get to an event like the Singapore Marathon, which is a repeat event, it's a lot easier because you've got timelines, you've got Gantt charts, all those kind of things in place, and you're just tweaking them year by year. But when you've got that blank piece of canvas and you're starting at the very beginning, it's a matter of being very clear on what all the different elements of everyone has to do and how you capture those and how you put a timeline. And in a way that everyone buys into it. So I had the great privilege and opportunity to work on the Sydney Olympics. I was the road event supervisor at the Sydney Olympics. So similar things and an incredible, life memorable experience. And we had all these similar things, but the software that had been prescribed by SOCOG, the Sydney Organising Committee, was something that everyone hated. And every month we got to a stage where it was it's accountability date, and everyone would kind of go and retrospectively fit all of their tasks into there to make sure that they met these key timelines.
Yes.
So really superfluous at the end of the day. People were being forced to do something, and in the bigger scheme of things, it obviously needed to be done because you've got this massive, all the other sports and everything else that dovetails into it. But without that buy-in, it became a process where we literally on the marathon had our own software. We were running our own timelines because we hadn't bought into the big picture, and that created issues for everyone. So where I'm coming back to in a marathon perspective, if you haven't got the clarity of vision, the communication of the vision from an engagement perspective, and then the tools to be able to help people to achieve that, you're going to inevitably run into some roadblocks. And carry on. Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask you about, you talked about the weakest link. Your team is only as good as the weakest link. How do you identify what the weakest link is? Because perhaps that's not always visible.
Yeah, there's two ways that I identify it. I identify it with a mindset that goes in expecting, not in a negative sense, but being prepared to expect that something will go wrong. So, you
expect the unexpected.
Expect the unexpected. And, we do huge amount of scenario planning, table topic and table topping to try and identify and role play different things that may be able to happen. So you can identify those on a personal level to say, well, we're not confident that particular manager's on top of their game, and then to be able to sit down and work together and provide support and engagement. And then to go into this with a mindset, not that we're expecting failure, but that we're prepared that something is going to go wrong. Absolutely inevitable. An event of that complexity, the numbers that I've just shared, the multiple stakeholders that you're dealing with, closing a city, outdoors, so you're open to the nuances of weather, whether that be lightning, whether it be wind, whether it be rain.
One of the few things you can't control.
Got no control over that. Absolutely. And then, the other part of the narrative working in Asia, and I've had the incredible privilege of being based in Asia for, I think, 16, 17 years now, is that you have these very different cultural nuances that you need to deal with as well. So for example, in many Asian cultures, face is, as we call it, is really, really important. So making sure that you don't put people in a position where they lose face, and
Mm.
and trying to when there is a problem, you've got to deal it in such a way that you're not embarrassing someone,
Mm.
because you then lose them off the bus, so to speak. So
Mm.
again, it's that it comes back to that whole engagement piece, is that how do you engage when something hasn't been done right? How do you engage with a weakest link potential type of person
Yep.
without making them feel that they're going to lose
Sure.
face? And I've got it wrong many times, and sometimes even still do, albeit that I'm still not running that business.
Yep.
Interpreting those nuances in different countries is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you find the idea of staff buddying with each other to keep each other accountable in the process? Does that work? Is that something you've investigated?
Yes, it's certainly not sometimes buddying people directly. So particularly giving a more junior person the opportunity to be buddied with someone else, but more I think creating a smaller kind of team environment in that situation.
Right.
We have situations where we do a lot of training. So most of those 5,000 volunteers need to attend one training day. And that kind of goes from a broader big group where there's a lecture type of thing in terms of the broader principles, and then breaking out into smaller groups, and then being in a position where we would do these role plays or tabletops where we literally say the course guys are sitting in that room with the radio, and the venue guys are here, and the marketing guys here, and the risk management guys, and you literally sit for hours on the radio saying, okay, the guest of honor is running half an hour late. What are we going to do? There's a lightning threat problem. We're behind time closing the roads for the course and whatever. So that buddying happens more in a group situation. And often, for example, you take an aid station which is where you give out the drinks. You might have 20, 30 staff that are working on that, and they've got a leader who fits into, a hierarchy, and, that they would buddy up more probably in a little core group that's working on that particular area.
Yes.
In the core team of the full-time staff, absolutely, there were mentors that looked after each of their, more junior people. I would mentor my senior management people and have that kind of buddying process.
Yes.
But when you get to that level, it's more of a kind of a group accountability that you work towards.
Understand. How does the group get together and set the priorities for what needs to be done? I mean, I'm guessing from an outsider's perspective, there must be so many things that you need to get into an order of priority, of being able to set the scene. Otherwise, you just get too overwhelmed with that input you're getting. How do you guys set the priorities for an event?
Yeah, it's lots of hours in boardrooms. It's whiteboarding. As I say, as you get down the track and you're repeating the event, you've got a template that you've used. You're in a position where you're not reinventing a huge amount of it. Albeit, I had a situation at one stage where my operations director left me, took my entire operations team and set up a competing business.
Wow.
We literally had 5 months to build a new operations team. Fundamentally, there were 1 or 2 people that stayed behind, but fundamentally, we had our whole marketing team intact, and the operations team had moved off to set up a competing business. So we were kind of reinventing the wheel again. So there was an element there of saying we had to kind of take the process of this is how we do it, this is how we're going to do it, and there was that level of urgency.
Yeah.
Massively stressful period of time. A new operations director who was coming up to speed, and senior managers in that team. So it was coming back to your question, how do you agree on what those priorities are? It's in that situation you have to be much more top line, and you just have to say, okay, this is the stuff that we've done for years. We're going to stick with it, and we're going to move through. This is kind of like the plan. But documenting, training, but at the very beginning, it's being very clear on these are the top line things we want to achieve, and then obviously timelining that and Gantt charts to make sure that you understand where the overlaps are. And there's obviously a system of, you're starting with the marketing, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes before the marketing, but there's a bunch of operational things that you need in that marketing. So, you can't announce the event and give the marketing people the tools that they want if you haven't got some degree of finality on the start venue, the finish, any changes that you might make to the course, the sponsors that are on board, and so on. So yeah, like you say, lots and lots of moving parts that are fitting into a jigsaw.
Very much so. What consequences for when things don't go well? Consequences for not being held to account. Do they apply to this? Do they apply in your business?
Oh, look, absolutely, and massive consequences. So you got an event with the numbers that we've spoken about that's being broadcast globally. So
Yes.
you're in a position where at 4:30 a.m. when the marathon used to start, you need to be ready to go live on TV. So the consequence of getting that wrong, where you don't start on time, has this massive knock-on effect at the really pointy, tough end of it,
Yes.
or little things along the way. And in these days of social media, that gets picked up and amplified very, very quickly. An aid station running out of water, or runners being sent the wrong way, or long queues at the baggage, or long queues at the check-in. Before you know it, that's being tweeted and Facebooked and Instagrammed, and the consequences can be
are enormous.
massive. Yeah, and then you have the very real consequence of people doing something that's incredibly arduous, and I've dealt with 5 people dying on my watch over the years, and that's obviously a massive consequence. Not only in terms of the responsibility, the impact that it has on your team from a mental and emotional perspective, and then the media elements of that, and they've every one of them's played out differently, where one of them never made it into the media, another one was a front page media story, and that then puts you into a whole other bunch of responsibility and accountability that you're dealing with.
So at that time, how did you address the responsibility point of view? I mean, these deaths that occurred, did you look at yourself in the mirror and think, oh wow, did I play a role in this?
Yeah, I think inevitably you have to. The buck stops with me at the top of the organisation, and I've always been, I believe, one of those people who's prepared to put my hand up and acknowledge. I mean, sometimes it's taken me, a month or 2 months to say, hey, look, that I didn't do that right. Hand up. But I believe that I'm a person that has the ability to say, that was my fault. I could have done that better. I should have done that better. The planning went wrong. I mean, in the reality in this space with what people are doing, accidents happen. I mean, the really high profile one was a tragedy where a young man fell off his bike, landed on his head, and died in hospital 2 days later. That was front page news, whatever. There was a coronial inquiry. We were exonerated. We went back, and we obviously every one of them presents an opportunity to learn. Whether someone's died or whether you've got something wrong in an event, they all present opportunities to improve and be better and be more accountable and more responsible next year. You've got this massive responsibility to say, we do everything that we can within our powers to mitigate the risk. You can never put on a risk-free event. And as we sit right now in these times of COVID-19, what we're trying to do is help our industry to come back. Our industry is being decimated globally. It's absolutely, there will be large portions, as in many industries of our industry, that just won't come back after this. So trying to work with event organizers, with governments, to stakeholders to say, how can we come to an acceptable level of risk of putting on an event which minimizes the amount of risk that we're exposing our staff to, our stakeholders to, our participants to, and that's always the rationale that we approach. We never know that we're going to stand on a start line with zero risk, but we need to, with a combination of all of our stakeholders, come to a level where we think we've got a plan to mitigate risk to an acceptable level.
And it's about balancing that, isn't it? It's never going to get, or it's not going to get back to the way it was before for who knows how long that is, or whether that may happen. So where is it we can take it from where we are now to where we'd like to be?
Absolutely.
You talked about review process. After an event, you go through the review process. Can you explain to me what's involved in that? Because I think there's some great learnings about how you review, and the importance of doing it quickly after the event.
Yeah, it's a really great point, Darren. So quickly is key. So what we would do is, and you imagine on an event like that, your core team is probably working in most instances close to 48 hours with very little sleep. So
Yeah.
you're in at it, you're physically drained, you're emotionally drained, absolutely exhausted. But what I would do is, typically the Singapore Marathon is on a Sunday morning. Most people won't finish until late Sunday afternoon, sometimes Sunday evening. And then the next morning is bringing the core team together, have a cup of coffee, start with a celebration. I'm always a fan of, let's accept and acknowledge what we've done. And sometimes that gets derailed. So, the debrief after the cycling event where the person died, that takes over the whole thing. You don't have the opportunity to celebrate, but have the celebration, but don't get carried away with the celebration. It's, okay, we'll have other celebrations later, but what could we do better whilst it's fresh in our mind? Let's document it. And I used to have an expression that I would always start it with: egos at the door. This is not a personal attack. But again, overlaying what I shared with you in Asian cultures of making people lose face, you still need to be, in our fairly open and Australian culture, you'd be in a position to say, Darren, you got that wrong. You didn't do that. You didn't do that. You wouldn't take that approach to that degree in most Asian cultures. So it's respecting that. It's respecting people's boundaries. It's wording questions in such a way. So we had this particular issue here. How's a way that we might have been able to resolve that in future, as opposed to, what, John, you didn't get that right. That created the problem.
Yeah, Chris, it fascinates me when when I think that at those moments where you want to address with a staff member, a team member who hasn't kind of worked out well for you, you're coming in with emotions. You're coming with frustration and maybe anger. And how do you then take that moment to think about how they're going to take that information you're giving them, so you can make sure you readdress and you deliver that your message in an appropriate method to suit how that person's going to take it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I haven't always got it right, and I still don't always get it right. But I think it's being very conscious of what I call the power of pause. How can you take a step back and pause before you pose that question? Recognizing that some things are better left unsaid in that environment and said at a different time or on a one-on-one basis. So more of this praise in public, scold is too strong a word, but room for improvement in private.
Yes.
So as the leader, recognizing that you are bringing it to the fore in a calmer way, maybe having a side conversation. So often you'll go into these situations knowing what the core issues are before you even have the group meeting. So it's maybe having a quiet word with someone. I'd like you to see this question. I'd like you to respond to that one. We won't deal with that one. And again, recognizing people are tired, like you mentioned, emotion. We've had situations with people crying and so on, and I never feel proud of that, but there have been times when I've maybe pushed the envelope too far, where people have broken down in a meeting, and that then sets the tone for the rest of it. But being conscious of taking that pause, being careful of context, and then again maybe phrasing it to say, hey, we did this really, really well here. There was feedback that there was a problem over here. How might we have been able to do that so it didn't impact on the great feeling that we had there?
Yes.
Or we got this problem that's popped up in social media. What are the real facts behind it? Because social media can be your best friend and your worst enemy, and often the facts aren't necessarily what happened on the ground, but you need to be able to respond to what's being said up there. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, look, mate, thank you very much for your time today. I absolutely appreciate your candidness and sharing with me some really interesting and thought-provoking areas. The things that I loved about it, my notes here, you talk about engagement, and where and how it all starts, and having a clarity of vision, to make sure your message is clear to your team. Expect the unexpected. I mean, planning for something to go wrong, for something not to work out the way you'd hoped. It's a wonderful lesson for us all. But the power of pause. Um, it's absolutely fantastic, especially at that moment. I mean, I could just feel, you're going to do your nana, as we say. You're about to lose it, and you've just got to gather your thoughts and think about the other person, and the parameters that you need to set. And it's great advice. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Darren. Look, the power of pause is something that I mean, it's one of my keynotes as a speaker, and it applies to everything in life. Whether it's in a meeting like that or in an operational situation, and I saw it amazingly many years ago. I was with my parents in the UK, and my mum had thought she was having a heart attack, and the two paramedics arrived, and they came up the step in a very orderly fashion. And here's me, I dialed 000, and my head was spinning, albeit that my industry has taught me to be calm in situations like this. I was far from calm. And it was a male and a female paramedic, and they stopped at the door of the bedroom and they started asking questions. And again, my mind was racing. Come on, my mum's dying, let's move. But
Yeah.
that reinforced that if a paramedic in a potential life and death situation can implement the power of pause, there's no reason why any of us...
It sets a standard for everything else.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, what a good story. Thanks for sharing that with us today, mate. I really enjoyed our time together. And good luck. Good luck with your business, and good luck with getting everybody out there and active again, because it's just a good thing for the community.
Thank you, Darren. It's been so great to catch up. Really look forward to catching up again in person, hopefully on a beach in Bali. But thanks so much for the opportunity, and really look forward to seeing the copy of the book out on the shelves.
My pleasure, mate. Look forward to sending you a copy. Thanks, Chris.
Mate.
Cheers.
Bye.